In 1307, on a single Friday morning, the King of France ordered the simultaneous arrest of every Knight Templar in the country. Thousands of soldiers, monks, and bankers were seized at dawn, dragged from their beds and thrown into dungeons. Their crime, officially, was heresy. Their real crime was being richer than the king. The Knights Templar started as 9 men guarding pilgrims on the road to Jerusalem. 200 years later, they were operating the most sophisticated banking network the medieval world had ever seen, moving money across continents, lending to kings, and holding more liquid wealth than most European governments. They didn't set out to become bankers. They became bankers because the Crusades made it necessary, and because nobody else had solved the problem they solved. That problem was simple, but enormous. A knight traveling from Paris to Jerusalem, a journey of several thousand miles through hostile territory, couldn't carry enough gold to fund the trip without being robbed and killed. The roads were dangerous. Bandits were everywhere, and carrying visible wealth was an invitation to murder. The Templars offered a solution that sounds remarkably modern. A knight could deposit funds at a Templar commandery in Paris and receive a coded letter of credit. When he arrived in Jerusalem, he presented the letter at the local Templar house and withdrew funds in local currency. The money never physically traveled, only the letter did. This was, in practical terms, the invention of international banking, or at least its medieval prototype. Deposit in one city, withdraw in another, with the institution guaranteeing the transfer. The mechanism is identical to what any modern bank does when you wire money internationally today. The Templars simply did it 700 years earlier, with parchment instead of computers. But they didn't stop there. The Templar network expanded into lending. Kings borrowed from them to fund military campaigns. Nobles borrowed to maintain estates. The Templars charged fees on transfers and interest on loans, technically disguised as service charges, since the church prohibited usury, much as the Medici would later disguise interest through foreign exchange. At their peak, the Templars held properties across Europe and the Middle East. Over 9,000 estates, farms, vineyards, and mills. They operated their own fleet of ships. They maintained fortified commanderies in every major European city that functioned simultaneously as military garrisons, churches, and bank branches. They answered to no king, only to the Pope. They were, in effect, the first multinational financial corporation, wrapped in the armor of a religious military order. Their financial innovations were genuinely remarkable. They developed early forms of account management, tracking deposits, withdrawals, and balances for individual clients across multiple locations. They created a system of secure communication between commanderies that allowed them to verify letters of credit and prevent fraud across vast distances. They managed the French royal treasury for extended periods, acting as the kingdom's de facto central bank. And all of it was protected by the unique legal and military status the Templars held. As a religious order answering only to the Pope, they were exempt from local taxes, immune from prosecution in secular courts, and permitted to cross borders freely. This gave them an extraordinary competitive advantage over any merchant banker. They could operate in any kingdom without answering to its king. That independence was also what made them dangerous. By the early 1300s, King Philip IV of France was deeply in debt, much of it owed directly to the Templars. He was also envious of their wealth, suspicious of their power, and frustrated by their immunity from his authority. Philip couldn't tax them, he couldn't regulate them, he couldn't control them, and he owed them money he had no intention of repaying. So he decided to destroy them. On Friday, October 13th, 1307, a date that some historians believe contributed to the superstition around Friday the 13th, Philip's agents executed a coordinated dawn raid across France. Templars were arrested, their properties seized, their records confiscated. Under torture, many confessed to fabricated charges of heresy, blasphemy, and obscene rituals. The confessions were coerced and almost certainly false, but they provided the legal cover Philip needed. Pope Clement V, himself under heavy pressure from Philip, formally dissolved the Templar Order in 1312. The last Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, was burned at the stake in Paris in 1314. According to legend, as the flames rose around him, de Molay cursed both the king and the pope, declaring that both would meet God within the year. Philip died in November 1314. Clement had died the previous month. Whether prophecy or coincidence, the timing cemented the Templar legend permanently. But the real story isn't about curses. It's about what happens when a financial institution becomes more powerful than the governments it serves. The Templars didn't fail because their banking system was flawed. It was brilliant, so brilliant that its basic architecture survived for centuries after the order was destroyed. They failed because they built an institution that was simultaneously indispensable and unaccountable. Kings needed their services, but couldn't control their behavior. They operated across borders with no sovereign oversight. They accumulated wealth with no democratic check on how it was used. Replace commanderies with global branches. Replace letters of credit with digital transfers. Replace the Templar seal with a corporate logo. The pattern is identical to every modern debate about financial institutions that are too big to fail, too powerful to regulate, and too embedded in the system to remove without causing damage. The difference is that Philip IV had a solution available to him that modern governments generally don't. He simply arrested everyone and seized everything. It was brutal, dishonest, and driven entirely by greed. But it worked, precisely because the Templars, for all their financial genius, had forgotten the one rule that every powerful institution eventually learns the hard way. You can be richer than the king, or you can be independent of the king. You cannot be both. 9 monks guarding a road in Jerusalem built the most powerful financial network in medieval Europe. They moved money without moving gold. They lent to kings without demanding collateral. They built an institution that answered to God and accountable to no government. And for 2 centuries, they were untouchable until a king decided he'd rather destroy them than repay them. Subscribe for more. Next week, we're looking at the South Sea Bubble of 1720, the financial scam that bankrupted Isaac Newton and taught Britain a lesson it took 200 years to learn. I'll see you there.